Hello, this is Michael Tracy, and this is part 3 of a 3-part response to the claims that Andrew Irvine was unceremoniously removed from Mount Everest by the Chinese. I've not enjoyed making this series, and I am happy to have it over with so I can get back to the regular Mallory and Irvine content. The basic issue in analyzing a story that comes from an anonymous source is that you need to ask yourself how reliable the people conveying the information are, and whether it is likely they just made it all up, or embellished parts and exaggerated other parts of it. Since there is no way of getting the information directly from the source, in this case, it is best to look at the people conveying the information to determine if they typically invent, embellish, or exaggerate claims that can be verified. In part 1, I explored why the account of Jamie McGinnis had problems based on the timeline of its disclosure, with McGinnis performing a physical boots-on-the-ground search for Irvine immediately after allegedly being told the body was removed. As a follow-up to that video, Joachim Hemlid had interviewed the Chinese climber Zhu Jing in 2001, and Zhu had initially stated the body had been seen between 8,200 and 8,300 meters, but then corrected it to between 8,300 and 8,400 meters. That snow ramp that McGinnis went to in 2012 is the same one that Sinnott went to in 2019, and that I identified in the final resting place video. It is at 8,350 meters. In part 2, I explored the deception Mark Sinnott, Jamie McGinnis, and Tom Pollard put together on the 2019 expedition, which stooped to new lows on Everest by deceiving the Sherpas. This leaves me wondering, is there anything sacred? Is there anything that would simply be going too far? Well, Tom Pollard himself stepped over and left for dead Sunita Hazra on his 2016 summit, and now makes videos criticizing other people for doing the same thing, so clearly the bar is set rather low. Fortunately, Sunita Hazra was rescued by British climber Leslie Binns after Tom had stepped over her on his way to the summit. However, Gautam Ghosh was not so lucky. He died a short time after being stepped over by Tom. And despite what numerous internet charlatans say about the impossibility of recovering a body, Gautam Ghosh's body was removed the following year and returned to India, where a full autopsy was performed. Then his body was cremated according to his religious traditions, but I will be examining that autopsy in more detail in an upcoming video. Now, of course, there is no obligation to abandon your own summit bid to help someone else, but then making videos criticizing other people for making the exact same decision does seem a little bizarre. More problematic is that Tom has offered a variety of different accounts of his summit bid where he stepped over those two people, with the later accounts having significant embellishments and alterations that somehow had gone missing from the earlier tellings of the story. But for me, the following is the lowest of the low, where Tom Pollard appropriates Dave Hahn's personal experience and passes it off as his own. This is from an interview with Dave Hahn describing his role in finding George Mallory.
So they waited for me to document it, but they also waited for me because we weren't sure what to do. I was the climbing leader on that team. That wasn't the authority they were waiting for. We as a group weren't sure what to do because this climber that Conrad had found looked at peace.
So he was face down?
He was face down, head up the hill, arms outstretched. And, you know, you've come across this person who's had an accident on the mountain and that cost him his life. And we took a few minutes. The argument was made that, you know, maybe we shouldn't disturb him. And I made the argument that we should. You know, I said these men had died trying to be the very first to climb Mount Everest. To me, I believe they'd want the world to know whether they had made it or not. I believed that their own story was important, and that if we didn't do the job, if we merely found this person but didn't find out what they could tell us, then we were inviting others to do that. And so that if we were going to have control over disturbing this man, we should do it once and do it well. And that argument won.
And this is Tom Pollard giving a presentation in which it is him and not Dave Hahn that had those deliberations.
Exactly where he had been for 75 years, undiscovered, untouched. And suddenly the icon, the great god of mountaineering had been found. So we set about looking through his body area and where he was, hoping to find the camera. And it was a great moral dilemma for me. And I sat there near Mallory saying, what right do I have to even touch this site? It's a sacred site. Now, how do I get here and just suddenly get to search his pockets for a camera or something? And then we remembered that Mallory had traveled around the world to make talks, sharing his knowledge of Mount Everest, like his desire to learn about altitude and how man would handle altitude and the cold was the most important thing in his life. And so I realized that I was helping him to bring that story home. So we excavated as carefully as we could.
Now, Tom Pollard was not there when Mallory was found on May 1st. In the third poll, Mark Sennett reports that Tom had already headed down the mountain after having problems with his oxygen system. The third poll states that it was fact-checked by Tom Pollard, and regardless, the video of the 1999 find shows exactly who was there. Conrad Anker, Dave Hahn, Jake Norton, Tap Richards, and Andy Politz. Not only does Tom Pollard insert himself into the party that found Mallory, he steals Dave Hahn's personal story about what he did when they found the body. As Dave Hahn points out in the interview, he was looked to by the other climbers as being the senior climber. While Conrad Anker was well known as a great technical climber, back in May of '99, Anker had yet to summit an 8,000-meter peak, while Dave Hahn had prior summits of both Choyao and Everest. It was Dave Hahn the team looked to decide what to do, and I believe Dave Hahn's account of what happened that day. This is simply because Hahn comes across as a straight shooter, and this was obviously a very important and emotional occasion in his climbing career. He hasn't written any books or made any YouTube videos about it, with that interview being part of someone else's work. That interview has over 300,000 views, and for myself and thousands of other viewers, we appreciate Dave Hahn taking the time to discuss his authentic, personal stories and thoughts about George Mallory. In contrast, Tom Pollard was not even there that day, and yet there he is, stealing Dave Hahn's story and telling a paying audience that he was the one that somehow was struck with this moral dilemma. In the presentation, Tom hides the fact that he was not there when Mallory was found and would only go to Mallory's grave 2 weeks later and dig it up. However, his actions did not go unnoticed by the climbing community, with the Alpine Club issuing a statement on how Irvine's body should be handled if it were to be found. The body, if found, should be searched with the greatest care to avoid damaging the frozen body, as happened to that of George Mallory during a second search for more artifacts a few days after the first encounter. The guidelines go on to prohibit the digging up of the body and state that a major effort should be made to cover the body in stone. Of course, Tom left the body only partially buried after he dug it up. The account in the third poll makes no mention of any deliberations by Pollard as to whether to disturb the body. Why would there be? The body had already been examined, with numerous items removed and carried down to base camp. They were specifically returning to perform additional searching of the body with a metal detector. Although Tom states in the paid lecture that they had a metal detector when Mallory was found, this is also not correct. And here is Wade Davis's description of the second search.
And then, once the photographs of the clips were selling for $40,000, they sent 2 climbers, good men, these aren't bad people, back to the body. Essentially, if you think strictly in terms of the liturgy of the Anglican service with which they had committed it to the ground, they then exhumed the grave, robbed the body, lifted the body up like a piece of frozen log, and Tom Pollard crawled underneath it to look face to face with Mallory's face. This has never been reported. You could see the blood on his face. Now, Pollard, to his credit, did not snap that face, because that face would have been worth $50,000. But nevertheless, the body was, in some sense, violated.
Curiously, Wade Davis credits Tom for not taking a photo of George Mallory's face. And the third poll also states Tom considered taking a photo of Mallory's face, but after the photo had been published in The Sun and all the outrage that had rained down on the team as a result, he balked. But when talking to a newspaper reporter, Tom had reported that he indeed did take photos. So the photos do exist, and just about a year ago, Tom admitted that they exist, and he states he will not release the photos because it would be an affront to the family. Probably true, but the existence of the photo creates major problems for the hole-in-the-head story that has been unquestionably accepted by people for decades. I'll get into the problem with Tom's initial story and why the hole in Mallory's head is being erased from the ongoing narrative in an upcoming video. More problematic is that the third poll states Tom didn't take the photo, and it is difficult to believe that this fact was somehow just never mentioned to Mark Sinnott. However, now that Tom has made it public that the photos do exist, no doubt Mark Sinnott will issue a correction to the third poll. We will see how long it takes. The third poll also reports Tom searching Mallory's pockets by hand and finding the watch. However, an article in Vanity Fair from 1999 says that Andy Politz found the watch using a metal detector. Again, two different versions of the same story, with Tom taking credit for something someone else did. Third poll account then embellishes the find, noting Tom slid his fingers into Mallory's pants pocket and immediately found a round-faced watch with a thin leather band, an important artifact that had been overlooked by Jake Norton and Tap Richards. The crystal and minute hand were missing, but Tom noted that the hour hand, which would fall off later when they were carrying it off the mountain, was pointing between 1 and 2. Tom dug around in the pocket to see if there was any broken glass, but he found nothing, suggesting the crystal had broken somewhere along the climb. However, Politz's story in Vanity Fair makes more sense, as they clearly had a metal detector, and it was very likely they used it to search the body as they were looking for a metal camera. But they need that search to be more thorough to answer the question of whether the crystal was or was not in the pocket. Actually, it's not a crystal, but the covering for the watch was in the pocket or not. And so they simply embellish an account where Tom recalls doing something that he never did. And this brings us to the issue of summit rocks. I've previously described how the 1999 search team ripped up Mallory's clothing such that any search of the pockets by anyone would not have been useful in determining if summit rocks were present. However, as the "they didn't make it" crowd needs a spokesman for their narrative that there were no summit rocks, Tom stated the following.
The whole thing about pebbles in the pocket, I thoroughly checked every single pocket on the front of Mallory's body. There was nothing in his pocket that would say, here's a pebble or here's a rock.
And as he was not there on May 1st, there was no way he searched the pockets. Perhaps he searched scraps of clothing once they were returned to base camp, but this is meaningless as to whether they originally contained the summit rocks. So what we are left with is a person who will say anything to inject himself into the story, including passing off Dave Hahn's personal account as his own. His extreme bias against Mallory and Irvine making the summit is only eclipsed by his rather farcical assertions that the Chinese reached the summit in 1960. But what is the takeaway from this video series? Sure, the story about the Chinese removing Irvine has its problems, but in the larger context of the post-truth world, it is that manipulative techniques have come to be accepted as perfectly normal. There was no backlash against Mark Sinnott's abuse of the Sherpas in 2019. He continued to work on Nat Geo projects. Tom's channel continues to grow and gather an ever larger fan base of people who want to be lied to. It is not that they don't know the information is false. It is that, like any religion, wanting to believe is far more important than facts and logic. There's nothing that can be done for such people. And it is not just our little community of Mallory and Irvine enthusiasts. Almost monthly now, there is some major fraud exposed that has been going on for years. Tom's case reminds me of Lance Armstrong, with everyone insisting he was such a great guy, and the only people that didn't believe him were cynics and skeptics. So, how do we navigate through this post-truth world? The only thing you can do is educate yourself about the extent of the manipulative techniques, and join us over at the Yeti Academy, where I've created a new section devoted to exposing Tom's foolery. Ultimately, charlatans will always be with us, but that's fine. A Yeti's gotta eat.